Four Nights of the Apocalypse Chapter 209 is officially out, and this was a chapter that many of us have been anticipating and wanting for a long time. Ever since we learned about Lancelot's strength and power, and the cliffhanger that was at the end of the Lancelot one-shot with him and Jericho disappearing, we are finally beginning to get the answers to what happened in that 3-year time period where Lancelot had disappeared. And this is going to be incredible. And we also get our first look at potentially what looks like the Lady of the Lake. So we have a lot to dive into right now. But before we jump into this chapter, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. I'm planning on doing some discussion videos after the chapter's release, just my general thoughts in a vlog format, so look forward to those for any extended thoughts. Also, I have a manga podcast called Shonen Pulse on the Panel Focus YouTube channel, where me and 3 other creators, Nox, Yatsugami, and Papa Trophy, talk about 9 manga from 3 different magazines. It's a lot of fun, and we just broke 1,000 subscribers about a month ago. I really appreciate if you guys go and check it out. Link to that will be in the description down below. And I also have a second channel called GW Comics, where I talk about American comic books. It's a passion project of mine personally, and I would really appreciate if you guys go to check it out. I've got a lot of stuff planned for that going on at later points in the future, so I'd appreciate if you guys go and check it out whenever you get the chance. Link to that will also be in the description down below. And now, without further ado, let's get into the chapter. Chapter 209 of Four Nights of the Apocalypse, titled The Abduction. Cover image is Bonnie and Lancelot walking through Benwick as we're beginning the full training arc for Lancelot with his father. And the chapter begins pretty appropriately as it begins to rain. And once it does, Bond says that it rained just like this on that day, with Lancelot asking what's the training they're going to do. But Bond says it's not really any type of training that he thinks it is, saying that it's all about perfectly aligning himself with his surroundings: plants, trees, the forest, stone walls, and crowds and towns. As Lancelot thinks it's about fully clearing his mind out of everything. But Bond says, in a question, saying, "Clear your mind, huh?" As he then just disappears and Lancelot completely loses track of him in an instant. As Bond is just thinking out loud so Lancelot can pick him up with his ability of telepathy, saying, "No, I don't think that's quite it. I mean, here I am talking into your mind right now." And Lancelot is kind of frustrated that he fully lost track of Bond once more. As Bond goes on to say, "Do you know what people and animals can perceive outside of their 5 senses?" Lancelot takes a second to think about it and says that it's emotion. As Bond says, yeah, that's the way to figure it out. An easy example is when someone wants to kill you, as Bond undoes Zero Sign to talk to Lancelot face to face. Now Lancelot says by doing this that also means he has to shut down all of his emotions. But Bond says it's not as easy as that. But he says that now's a good time anyway. "Would you mind telling me? You've tried to discuss the events of 8 years ago a few times, but kept hesitating at the end. You were investigating a mysterious abduction only to get abducted yourself. What's the truth behind that?" As Lancelot begins to flash back to the ending events of the Lancelot one-shot that was released after 7 Deadly Sins ended and before 4 Nights began, with repeats of dialogue about something parting the rain as if it is some sort of break in the atmosphere with Jericho behind Lancelot. As we then cut to what happened after the two of them went into that bizarre divide in the rain, as they are then stormed with a bunch of rainwater as Jericho holds on to Lancelot tight, as then the rain dissipates, as the two of them are now in a bizarre new location. Yeah, Jericho's back in the story, though this time in the form of flashback, and this is very important to Lancelot as a character and his entire backstory and past, and this could also help enlighten us what the heck happened to Jericho's whole thing in that time period where they disappeared, because I really don't want to see Jericho back in the main story until we have more clarification to see if her mind was messed up in some way, like, because of this, between the time frame of this and them getting out. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. Let's continue with the chapter. So the two of them are now alone in some bizarre area as we get a 2-page spread showcasing this seemingly endless horizon with what seems like a pathway and some rocks in a large watery area as they're no longer in Benwick and are not sure where they are. And even the sky is pitch black. And there's just a pathway with a puddle of water in between them. But Jericho stops Lancelot from looking down into the water to keep him from potentially falling down, as it's revealed that this is just a very, very deep lake. And Jericho thinks it looks like that they've also been taken just like that peddler from before, and as well as potentially others that were abducted or taken due to these bizarre sightings. Now Jericho says the situation quickly, saying that it's up to the two of them to step up, work everything out to find the truth, and find a way out of there. With Lancelot getting all excited that he's gonna get on the job and prove how strong he is, and to catch the perpetrator of these events. And giggling off to the side, saying that this will probably make his dad say that he did a good job and be proud of him. While it's a bit subtle in some ways that hardcore fans can actually pick up on it, as a kid, as seen in the Lancelot one-shot, Lancelot really admires his father and just wants to be acknowledged by his dad, so that's why he's jumping at the opportunity to do this to prove to his dad that he is strong and capable. But we then cut to 3 years later, as Lancelot, who again is 10 years old by the way in this section, is complaining that they've been walking for a long time and they haven't found the guy that disappeared or the exit, as he keeps basically nagging Jericho to wonder where the abductor is anyway. As the two of them then stop to get some rest, and so Lancelot can drink up some water. Which is also a good time for Jericho to exposit what they've worked out so far, saying that the path is only over this lake and it doesn't seem to end. Another thing is that drinking the water fills them up without them needing to eat, and strangest of all, they never even get tired. With Lancelot saying he bet his dad would love some ale made from this water, which Jericho agrees, as then something appears from out of the lake and grabs Lancelot from the side, as it appears to be some sort of octopus tentacle that tries to drag Lancelot into the depths of the lake. Jericho uses her free saber to try and free Lancelot and attack and destroy this octopus tentacle, but it dodges the attack and drops Lancelot at the same time. Lancelot, getting worked up, says, "How dare you do that to me?" with Jericho telling Lancelot not to push things. And Lancelot unleashes his shining road, but it was deflected rather comedically by the creature in the lake. So this shows just how vastly different and less powerful Lancelot was as a kid comparison to the absolute monstrosity that he is right now. As Lancelot is just beside himself thinking, how did it slip away? And it did that to my sure kill move, with Jericho trying to cheer him up, saying that it didn't do nothing, this monster just fled because you dealt it too much damage. But again, lying to Lancelot is not going to work since he can clearly read her mind clear as day, and even says that the monster dodged out of the way of her move, which, that is something. It bounced back Lancelot's attack, and it just dodged Jericho's move. Most likely, it knew that it would do some damage, and so it dodged out of the way. But Jericho just basically says, hey look, despite what happened, you're still pretty strong for a kid anyway. We then cut to 10 days later, as Lancelot is starting to get frustrated with this situation, wondering when they're going to get the hell out of there. With Jericho saying to calm down, and that they have to find the criminal in the exit first, but that seems to be all Jericho ever says, with Jericho saying, I'm sorry, but we still have no leads. But it's then that Jericho notices something floating in the lake in the distance. The two of them run towards this location of the lake, of the pathway, and they see the person that was the peddler in the Fairy King's forest that disappeared before, who got abducted, as they're wondering what happened to him, as it seems that he's dead, floating in the water, with them wondering what does this abductor really want. But Lancelot points to Jericho, saying to look off in the distance, as in sheer silence, we see a bunch of dead bodies floating in the lake. And this is incredibly, and I mean incredibly dark imagery, as whoever was abducted seems to have been drowned in the lake, potentially by that tentacle creature from earlier, and for reasons we don't know yet. We then cut to about 20 days later, as Lancelot is beginning to talk to Jericho, and Jericho just trying to get the kid to go to sleep and rest. But Lancelot basically says everything about his dad, about his origins, how he was a thief, how he fell in love with Elaine, how he had immortality, how he gave up immortality to save Elaine, saying that after that he became an incredibly great hero, as Gowther told him all about this. Similar to what happened at the end of Seven Deadly Sins, where Gowther used his abilities to basically tell the entire story, or project the entire story of Meliodas and the Seven Deadly Sins into Tristan. Said he did the same thing for Lancelot, which honestly is a good way to give information. Jericho says, yeah, I know, you got a real good dad. But Lancelot says, I hoped that I could be like him. With Jericho saying, well, why don't you? I'm sure that you can, but she gets cut off by Lancelot, as he says he can't, as he begins to cry and tear up, saying, we're gonna die here anyway, like those people in the lake, and that he bet his mom is crying her eyes out looking for him, as he wants to see his parents. As, yeah, we're all used to the stoic Lancelot that we know right now, but now we're seeing him as a vulnerable child in an isolated place where he knows that if push comes to shove, if everything goes wrong, he will die. And so Jericho now is holding him, saying that he's going to be okay and not to cry, saying she'll stake her whole life on protecting him. Now, the Jericho stuff in the present aside, this is a good moment, because we know from the Lancelot one-shot that Jericho is Lancelot's instructor. She has personally trained him to be a skilled warrior, despite him, being a kid and still being relatively weak for all things considered. But she is also his guardian, so of course in this situation she wants to make sure he gets out safe and bring him home to his parents. And so, again, I am curious to see the whole shift in her demeanor and personality towards Lancelot, if this is due to this bizarre realm, or Arthur, or whatever, for the future of the story with her current day, because I really, really don't want the image of, Jericho, the master and guardian of Lancelot, that kind of looks after him like a brother and family, into what we got. So, it's razor thin, the cope and copium I have to get an actual proper explanation for things. We just gotta wait and see. But, as Jericho was consoling Lancelot, someone appears from the lake saying, what's the matter? As this catches the two of them off guard, and in the final page of the chapter, we see a very mysterious woman appearing from outside of the lake, with dark sunken eyes and long hair, as the chapter ends. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is most likely the Lady of the Lake. In Seven Deadly Sins, all we got was just some vague silhouette of her previously. But now that we're in the lake, this otherworldly dimension where dead bodies are brought through some bizarre abducting portal or something in an endless, maze pathway with a bottomless lake and some creature that drags whoever comes into the lake and kills them, we now see what appears to be the Lady of the Lake. And apparently, that's what the title of the next chapter is going to be, based off of the Japanese translations and editor's notes. So that is basically a confirmation. But still, why is she here now? Why did she do this whole abducting plan with random civilians? And what's going to happen to Jericho and Lancelot now? As now we're finally getting to the real answers of Lancelot and Jericho's disappearance 8 years ago in that 3-year time frame. And I am dying to find out soon, because for this to be a mini flashback, I am excited. I can't wait to see the truth of Lancelot's insane power and what happened at the lake. But I'm curious to see what her motives are, and again, what happened to Jericho and her mentality over this period of time. And I failed to mention this at the beginning of the video, but when Bond mentioned for Lancelot to tell him everything about what happened 8 years ago in the disappearing, he says that Lancelot would try and tell them a bit of it, but would clam up towards the end. Meaning that he tried to tell them what would happen the last time he saw them, every chance he got, but he would always keep himself from answering for whatever reason. And so now we're finally getting the true answers, and now this is also Bond's first time hearing out Lancelot for what happened. And potentially learning about this, Lancelot airing everything out and telling everything to Bond will help in his training with Zero Sign, and we'll finally get to see how the story progresses from that point forward and what he'll do with it. And potentially give us clues as to how the Lady of the Lake is tied into everything. Especially since she is the one that basically helped with the unsealing / awakening of chaos within Arthur. So this is getting exciting. But what did you guys think about this chapter? Leave your thoughts, opinions, and theories in the comment section down below, and look forward to the post-chapter discussion that I'm planning to have sometime later this week or this weekend, because I do want to think about this more and make an extended thoughts. And what's more, if you haven't already, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. And with all that said and done, hope you all have an awesome day.